All right, we're going to keep things moving with our breakdown guest for the evening. He is the executive director for the Kenwood-Oakland Community Organization, one of the oldest Black-led, membership-based grassroots community organizations in Chicago, dedicated to serving low-income and working families. He is also a member of the Lift the Ban Coalition. He has worked with communities on 5 continents, but not Antarctica because fuck those penguins. And he is here tonight to talk to us about taking on the Obamas and fighting to create a community benefits agreement for the Obama Presidential Center. Make some noise for Jawnza Malone! How are you doing, Jawnza?
I'm great.
Good.
How y'all doing?
Yeah. All right, so let's start. Can you tell us how a CBA actually works and what is going on? What is going on with the CBA and what you want to be included in it?
So, community benefits agreement simply is an agreement that takes place between the community, a developer, and a lot of times the government is brought in just as a sort of balancing effect, right? Something that we have control over. We put our money into the system, right? So to help make it legally binding, the government acts as sort of that third party, right? But the idea is that when people come into our community to extract whatever it is, some public asset, what do we get in return, right? You think about every large-scale development that's happened, not just in this country, but around the world, right? The resources get sucked to make sure that somebody is able to put money in their pocket, and then people get displaced. People aren't able to take advantage of the stadium that's built or whatever it is, right? So the idea is meant to be an equalizer, right? If you're taking from me, what am I getting back in return?
Mm-hmm. And so right now, the CBA regarding the Obama Presidential Center, this has already been like a multi-year, multifaceted fight. Can you give us a history of how this fight has gone down up until now, and what are some of the tactics organizers and community stakeholders have used to demand protections for the residents of Woodlawn? Damn.
Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, use your
how much time? All right, the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
So when the announcement was made that the presidential then library, right, was going to come to Chicago, everyone was excited, right? Yeah, it's this huge opportunity. The emphasis was on all the benefit and no discussion around the risk, right? And so because of our previous experience creating a benefits agreement related to the Olympic Summer Games that Chicago got knocked out of, and just the research that we've done to understand the impact of development on communities, STOP, in Woodlawn, us, some other groups was like, wait a minute, like there's a piece of the conversation that ain't happening. Right, and so back in 2016, we were trying to lift up that piece. Like, there's some real risk that's involved with this development. It's not just about the feel good. And so what happened was we were able to, in a real ground-up process, bring people who lived in these communities to the table to say, what is it you're concerned about? And from that, people had concerns in 6 different areas, housing being one of the main ones. In 2017, Redfin, this online, y'all know what I'm talking about, Redfin? Okay. 2017, Woodlawn had the 3rd highest increase in property value for any neighborhood in the country. So you think about that, right? Take every neighborhood. There's like 77 just in Chicago. Well, 78 with this new thing. They're trying to make some money off of it. Right, but you take every neighborhood in every city, in every state in the country, Woodlawn was number 3. And the only thing that changed was the announcement that this center was going to go in their neighborhood, right? And so we've been pushing to say, there's a real problem here. And if we aren't addressing it, that 300,000 black folks that have been pushed out since 2000 is just going to keep going up. And so we're at a point where we've been in conversation with the mayor's office after the ordinance was introduced by Jeanette Teller, who got elected alderman in 20th Ward. Shouts out to Jeanette. From that, I want to tell you, I might get in a little bit of trouble, but the mayor didn't want to introduce. Surprise, right? But she actually wanted Jeanette to hold off introducing the ordinance back in July. So since July, there was several months where they wouldn't even engage us. Like, we're talking to the chair of the housing committee, we're talking to the mayor's office, we're talking to all these people like, look, this ordinance is there. You had almost 30 aldermen sign on in support of it. Like, we need this thing to move. And for months, they just ignored us. And so when it came time, you know, Jeanette ain't no punk, so she's like, look, we moving this thing, right? Either with you or without you. That's when they started talking to us and then came with this weak mess that they put in the paper.
Right, because just, you know, this week the city kind of announced its own plan for kind of trying to preserve affordable housing. So, you know, how does this plan differ from what you all are aiming for, and how are you feeling about it? You called it mess, so it doesn't
it's
sound
like night and day, right? If, all right, you walk into a restaurant, say, hey, I want a burger and fries, and they...
An Impossible Burger, I'm vegan too.
I like those Impossible Burgers.
They're good as hell.
Yeah. So I want an Impossible Burger and fries, right? And you come back out with a Caesar salad, I'm not going to be thrilled. The Caesar salad might be good, but that's not what I asked for. And so that's what we're getting, right? We're saying right now, people are being pushed out of Woodlawn, South Shore, and Washington Park, right? Just off speculation. The center ground hasn't been broken yet for it. So just off speculation, people driving up in cars, jumping out, taking pictures, jumping back in a ride and driving off, right? That's what's happening. And so our thing is there needs to be a set aside. So any rehab, because that's a lot of what's happening, right? They're able to buy these places for a little bit of nothing, put a few $1,000s in it, and then next thing you know, it's on the market for thousands of dollars a month, right? We need to make sure there's a set aside of affordable housing for new construction as well as rehab. Lightfoot said that's off the table. Like, we can't even talk about that. Let's talk about some other stuff.
That doesn't sound progressive. What was the Chicago editorial board talking about? Or as I like to call them, fucking idiots. So then what is the CBA that you guys are pushing for, actually asking for?
So in addition to the 30% set aside, right, our thing is we need to make sure that people who live in the community are able to benefit, right? So there needs to be a trust fund set aside to make sure that as rent goes up, right, there is a pot that people can apply to, right? If, Ricky, look.
Talk to me.
Since 2016, right, we've been saying this is a problem that's going to happen. For 3 years now, we've seen rent continue to increase and people pushed out. We've continued to see property taxes increase and people pushed out. Right, there's people who lived in their homes for 45 years, raised their families. They're in the golden years of their life. And they're at risk of losing a home because of the increase in property taxes. So there needs to be a trust fund established to help people in this situation. There also needs to be land trusts set up, right? The city owns acres and acres of land in Woodlawn, vacant lots. What is the city doing to make sure affordable housing gets placed there? And so we're saying those city-owned lots need to have affordable housing placed on.
I like that ratio.
See?
And you're talking about Woodlawn, so I was thinking about 7 things at once right now, and then I was like
So just real quick, there's another thing, right? The impact of the Presidential Center doesn't just impact a single community. So South Shore, Woodlawn, Washington Park are all being impacted right now, right? You have developers who are purchasing, rehabbing, and constructing new real estate development in all 3 communities, and part of their pitch is right next to the Presidential Center. But again, Lightfoot said, we're not going to talk about South Shore, we're not going to talk about Washington Park, we're only going to talk about Woodlawn, and a small sliver of Woodlawn at that. And so, again, knowing what the problem is, why are we not addressing the problem? Right. It looks like it's just about theater.
Right. And so, I mean, I'm even thinking about that, right? Like, in what ways, like, is Woodlawn unique, and in what ways are conversations around gentrification and displacement different in Woodlawn than, even here in Pilsen or Logan Square and other neighborhoods in Chicago?
In some ways it's different, but in a lot of ways it isn't, right? When you think about the impact of Paseo or the impact of 78, right? You think about any of these large-scale developments, the reality is the real estate industry is a corrupt industry. We all know this, right? The idea is to buy low and sell high. And so as areas gentrify and they become unattainable for the average person, they have to find some new place where they can generate profit. When the land value becomes too high, it becomes almost impossible for them to extract profit from these developments. So they have to go someplace else. And so that's why Woodlawn is one of these key places. We see the same thing happen here in Pilsen, right? Austin, on the west side, right? These things are happening in all these communities because they've intentionally been depressed for years. And so, yeah, there are some unique situations happening in Woodlawn because of the Presidential Center and the new train station they put at 63rd and Cottage Grove and all the jewel they put in. So there's these things they're doing to create incentive, right? But it's the same thing they're doing to create incentive in places where they want development to happen.
Yeah, I mean, even when you're like, you're drawing these kind of like similar resonances when other neighborhoods get gentrified, and one of the things that I think about so often is like this thing of monumentalization that happens, right? So even like at Paseo, this way of like kind of like historicizing and making a monument to the people that are about to be replaced, right? And then when you think about like the whole narrative of Obama being this black community Southside organizer that was reaching his community, that's part of his narrative of ascent. It's like, okay, we're going to monumentalize that and the people that are there that are about, that are about to get replaced, right? We see it over and over again. And I think that's when I think about the notion of the monument, right? It's supposed to be an invulnerable thing, right? You can't contest with it. It's supposed to make almost something sacred in a way. And one thing that makes this fight unique is who you're fighting, right? Like nobody has pictures of Chicago real estate developers on their wall, but motherfuckers love Obama. You know what I mean? Like, and so like even some of the people that you're trying to mobilize, I'm sure, and in the community that you're trying to protect, revere the man whose name will be on the building. So like, how has this kind of like hero worship of Obama impacted the organizing that you all are doing here, and how have you worked around it?
Yeah, it is definitely a bit of a tightrope. One thing that the leaders who are moving this campaign forward, who live and have lived in Woodlawn, South Shore, etc., have said is like, look. We voted for the guy, right? We love the guy. This is not about us bashing the Obamas, right? This is about us making sure we have a place to live, right? How can you can't substitute the two, right? It doesn't help me if I celebrate this man, right, this figure, and I gotta move next week, not knowing where I'm gonna go, right? I got to figure out a new route to get back and forth to work. I got to figure out a new school to send my child to. I got to figure out where I'm going to be safe in this new community, not knowing where it's going to go, where I'm going to be at, right? And so there is no substitute for the two, right? I don't know. Did you see the pictures the Obama sent out around the holidays?
No, I hope not. Check it out.
But
you should see the pictures I was sending out around the holidays.
But I was at this thing, there's the guy, Professor Mitchell at the University of Chicago, held a symposium a couple years ago to tease out this argument, right? To like, what is it about this center and this quest for a CBA that we just can't negotiate around? Like, why is it the foundation, the University of Chicago, and the city of Chicago have determined who they want to talk to and what they want to talk about. And the community is getting iced out in the process, right? So at the end of this symposium, this retired principal, black woman, came down and said, to my face, I wanted to smack you because of the way you were disrespecting the first black president. Now, through the whole thing, I'm going through great pains to say, like, I'm not talking about this man. It's not about this man.
Leave that to me, Deporter-in-Chief.
But the University of Chicago wrote the bid, right? Nobody's talking about the university in this role historically in a community of Woodlawn, let alone with the center. They wrote the bid, right? Now, yeah.
And it's also the way universities actually do that function. I mean, here at UIC was crucial to the gentrification of Pilsen and the surrounding communities.
That's right. And the University of Chicago, out of every university in the country that is gentrifying communities, they're at the top, right? Cranes has written articles on top of articles about how the university is leading real estate development in the country. Right? And so how do they get a pass? And our point is they should not get a pass.
So much of this fight has been, it's you hear so much about, we actually don't even hear a lot about the content of the CBA, right? And more about the process that communities have to participate in protest, and against and against displacement. I think that's one of the things that kind of gets left out, right? And so what mechanisms does the city have, and what does the city need so that communities can actually focus on protecting their homes and don't have to spend all their time trying to create the structures for the conversation?
So that's really the question, right? There is a culture within the city of Chicago and most cities to ignore the voices of the people, right? The people most impacted should be the ones first consulted on anything that happens. We're the taxpayers, right? Things are supposed to happen on our behalf, right? With our engagement, but that's not the case. And so first and foremost, what should have happened when Jeanette introduced the ordinance back in July, the first thing the housing commissioner should have done was to come to the community to figure out, okay, what do you need here? Let's start with this ordinance that got introduced and figure out how to do it. That's not what happened, right? And so the 30% set aside, the trust fund, the land trust, making sure there's opportunities for homeowners to stay in their homes, make sure that people who want to purchase homes have the ability to purchase homes on these city-owned lots, right? These are very basic, fundamental things that any city should be working to provide for its residents. But that's not what's happening. And the fact that we're being fought, right? Everyday lay people saying, we've done the policy work, we've met with the people, they're with this, get it done, why can't we do that?
Right. So I mean, if it were up to you, and even thinking about the people that that you've been organizing with, what would you build? Whether trying to build a presidential center, or if anything at all.
I'll leave that to the people.
She's modeling her principles. You see that? Are you an Aquarius?
Aries. Virgo.
Earth sign? No.
Yes. Virgos make the world go round, right?
They make something.
Stacy, you wanna help me out? See?
Are you a Virgo though? See, I can fuck with Capricorn. But wait, this is awkward now. But let's talk, Jawnza. So, I keep on thinking about this, and I do think about, part of, I think about so much about the segregation in Chicago, but there's also kind of like the segregational divides and how we even approach causes, right? And so I think so much, one of the things about gentrification is the fact exactly what you said, is that it's a process that echoes, right? And then we kind of see it like this recurring thing. And so what are kind of things that people can do, right, to kind of support the work that you're doing, and kind of support the work that Coco was doing and the CBA?
I'm glad you asked that question.
It's like she knows what she's doing sometimes.
So, on the 28th, January 28th, at 5 o'clock, Harris Park, 62nd and Drexel, we're having a community meeting. This is, again, in line with what we've been doing for years now, bringing the people into the room, providing the information like, look, this is what's happening. The alderwomen, Harrison and Taylor, are expected to be there. Say, this is what's happening. We introduced it. This is what the city has said. This is what the city has done. What do you think? Right? And let the people chop it up. This isn't about me trying to make a name for myself, right? This is about making sure that the people who continue to be pushed out of this city have an opportunity to fight back. We should not just go just because somebody wants us out of here, right? How many places can you go and have access to fresh water? How many places can you go and you have roots there where your family has bled, right? Where you have the social structures in place, right? So the thing about displacement that people ignore right? Because, you know, people don't care about black people. Did you know that?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to.
And so when people hear 300,000 black people got displaced since 2000, it's like, oh yeah, that's bad. So sorry for you guys.
Right.
But people ignore the fact that if you got displaced from one place, that means you got to go somewhere else. And if it don't work out there, there's no support system.
Right.
And so as we look at the numbers of people facing homelessness exploding across the country, one of the drivers of that is the displacement of black and brown people from cities. Right? If I gotta move, all right, I got 30 days, I'm throwing myself in the garbage bag, figuring out wherever it is I'm gonna get to, wherever it is I'm going. If it don't work, if that job I think I got, I lose, what else I got? I just spent all my money trying to get to this place. And so now me, my kids, you know, we're on a couch in somebody's crib for as long as they'll put up with us. After that, where are we going? On the street. And so you look at all these places where we're being driven to, look at the homeless rates in those cities. It's us. And if we are not stopping the fact that we keep getting pushed out of these places, ending up on the street, what are we talking about?
When is the meeting?
January 28th, 5 o'clock, 62nd in Drexel, Harris Park.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Jawnza Malone. Let's give it up one more time for Jawnza Malone.